the best thing is when when it's no longer even in your head, the memorization, when you're embodying it and the lines are just in you and the scene is almost just happening. And that was the place I got to.
Hello and welcome to this very special conversation that I'm having with my client, Jasmin Singer. So, the purpose of this video, we are going to go over how I helped her get off book for the role of Judy Garland in End of the Rainbow. And so, we're going to just kind of recap that whole process, and it kind of gives people a good framework for how to get off book for really big roles like this, really demanding roles like this. But first, I'd like to introduce Jasmin. Jasmin, you're an actress, but you also do all kinds of things. So, like, if you can just tell a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you. I couldn't have done this monstrosity of a part without you. It was more work than anything I've ever done. And it was also such a joy, but that's hugely due to the fact that you were there supporting me throughout the process and giving me tools and tricks. So I'm excited to talk about some of those tools and tricks. Yeah, I am an actor, I'm an author, I am a radio host at the NPR station in Rochester, New York, and I also help people publish books about animal rights. So that's kind of the nutshell of what I do, but my first love is for sure the theater.
And just to introduce myself real quick for anybody out there who doesn't know me, I am Joyce Hshieh and I am a memory coach for actors. So this is what I specialize in helping people get off book. So this is going to be a good, like I said, framework, but also if anyone is interested in working with me one-on-one, this is kind of what you could expect from the process too. So let's get into End of the Rainbow and the role of Judy Garland. This is like a massive role, amazing opportunity, but a lot that went into this. Can you talk about what it
Yeah.
was like preparing?
So, really quickly, End of the Rainbow by Peter Quiller is a play with music. The story centers around the very tragic and glorious character, icon, Judy Garland, at the very end of her life. So it takes place in 1968, in December of 1968, which is about 7 months before she ultimately died from drug overdose. And it takes place over the course of 6 weeks when she was doing a concert in London called Talk of the Town. So all of that really happened. This is based on her actual story. And it has a very tiny cast. It's largely Judy, but she's also there with her fiance Mickey and her pianist Anthony. And then there's another small part that plays multiple roles here and there. So it focuses on her lifelong addiction with drugs and with love and the ways that she's broken, but more so than that, the ways that she's resilient and the ways that she's really continued to thrive despite all that was thrown at her. So it was an emotionally demanding role. I almost said emotionally damaging. I wonder if I should call a therapist real quick. Hang on, just kidding. It was an all-consuming experience for me as an actor, but also as a person. It has forever changed me. And the reason I clarified that it was a play with music is because I would say maybe half of the audience who came to see it thought, oh, it's Judy Garland. It's going to be just a bit of song and dance. And for sure, there are old standards in it, 12 songs in it. But it is really about the woman behind the magic that a lot of people don't necessarily know the depths of this story. So to prepare, it was like, 83 pages of, monologue after monologue after monologue with broken up by small little quips with these guys who sharing the stage with and these songs. I don't remember how many costume changes there were, but many, many, many costume changes, all super fast. I had an incredible team, but all of it really started with the work that I did with you, which we started working together before rehearsal even began, because I knew there was no way that I would be able to really get into the character while still being on book.
So you had to do so many things where you were singing, you were acting, but there's also just like unraveling too. You're like emotionally unraveling in the play. So it's just like emotional highs and lows at every level. It was just super, super demanding.
Every physical level too. I started getting in shape because I wasn't very in shape, but I must have burned like 2,000 calories during every rehearsal because she's a rabbit basically running around the stage. She's being carried, she's crawling on the floor, she's like, falling down sobbing, she's singing.
Drunk, she's almost
Yeah,
throwing up. Or like,
exactly, exactly. So it was an incredible experience.
so I thought we would go into kind of the different stages that we did with tackling this role. And like you said, you came to me pretty early on where we had the like benefit of time where you had rehearsals. You came to me kind of in August, and I think rehearsals started in November. Is that right? If you remember,
They
something like
started
it's
in
like October.
mid-October,
Yeah.
mid-October. And we had worked together on a couple other plays as well in the past. So I already knew that I needed you. And you had been so helpful during the couple other plays we worked on. But I feel like those were just like the training wheels for this.
Because this was like you're on pretty much every page. You
Yeah.
have giant monologues and all kinds of stuff. So the big thing that we started with was even before we started meeting for coaching sessions, you gave me the script and I actually went through and like broke down the script. So there are 10 scenes in the play, but most of the scenes are like massive scenes. And so I went in and I took every scene and I broke it down into beats. So there were these scenes where there was like 17 beats, but what it did was like it gave us this really clear roadmap and picture of like what each scene was about and where it went, what the journey was. I broke it into beats and I also gave each beat a name. So it was just like very clear what parts were in each scene. Also, for any speeches that you had that were kind of more substantial, like chunky or like paragraphs, I actually went in and broke those up into phrases so that you could clearly see like one phrase per line. And so I did that with the entire play and I gave it back to you and you had this version of the script then that was like more memorization friendly, like you had that to work off of. And again, it was just like this clarity of okay, this is the work ahead of us. Can you talk about what that was
Yes.
like?
I cannot state enough how much it changes the experience of memorizing when you take those long paragraphs and you divide them up. It just like psychologically something shifts. I mean, also as an actor, you start to recognize the shifts in the pacing and in the objectives. But just since we're focusing on memorization here, the process of memorizing like a two-sentence little paragraph here is so much easier for me to wrap my head around than like a 19 sentence paragraph. So and it wasn't like random. You gave it different chunks based on how the objectives were changing. So even though I realized that your main focus is memorization coaching, I actually really got a lot in terms of acting coaching as well as sort of like I would say a side benefit, but that feels like it's dismissing the gravity of it because it was very, very important to my process of becoming Judy. But from a memorization standpoint, having you do that, it also like gave me it made me feel really taken care of. Like I needed that. And that's the kind of thing that I would personally have a block around doing myself. So that support from the get-go, exceptional.
Yeah. I do think about that sometimes where it's like, yes, I am a memory coach, but because the memorization is so tied to the performance, it's almost like performance coaching, but through the lens
Yeah.
and vehicle of memorization because it's so needed to get off book, but like the best way to do it is like through an understanding of the performance. So yeah, I always like grapple with that a little bit. So the next thing that we did is we also used this tracker. So like once I broke down the script like that, I put everything on this drag and drop tracker board. I had every scene. There was 10 scenes. And how this board is, there's columns representing each stage of the memorization process. So it's like not started, it's barely memorized, it's somewhat memorized, mostly memorized, and then you're off book. And then, so what you do is as you get the scenes more and more memorized, you're dragging the scene cards across the board. So at every step of the way, you can know immediately where you are in the process, like how far along you are. It's not a guessing game of like, am I having trouble with this spot or this scene or whatever? It's just that clarity and that organization, I think, is always like a huge piece for me in that like foundational stage of getting started and then just being very clear, oh, I need to revisit this scene. I need to work on this more.
Absolutely. I mean, that works really well with my brain. And that's how I organize my to-do lists also. So that spoke to me and my organizational, habits as well. And again, having you set it all up made it easier to wrap my head around. I will admit that it's overwhelming at the beginning for a role this size to like see everything that's on the left, like I haven't done any of it yet. But then as you start to move it over, it's just like running, right? Like if you're going to go running for 5 miles or something, like at the beginning, maybe you're not feeling great. It's like, oh God, all right, fine, I'll go. And then you've gone a block, and then suddenly a half a mile, and then you're a mile. Okay, it's not so bad. I already did a fifth of it. This was very similar. So it was a really good sort of 1,000-foot high view of what I still had ahead of me. And I started to get proud of myself as I would like move it along.
Yeah, there is like a psychological piece to that, I think, where it's like satisfying to see it move along and to see that you're actually making progress. That's really
Mhm.
cool. So that was kind of the foundational piece of our process. And then we actually started meeting together. We were doing about once a week, but then we kind of moved it up to twice a week for a while. And so during this stage, the big thing that I emphasized like very early on was getting up on your feet and actually doing the scenes. And this is something that I know like a lot of people, a lot of actors, a lot of my clients and stuff, they can kind of get tripped up a bit with this because they feel like, oh, I'm not ready yet. Like I need to be more memorized first and do kind of more memorization before I'm ready to really get up and act and kind of do the scene. So it feels awkward to them or it feels vulnerable or maybe kind of like silly or something. But I always like am like, just trust me. Like sometimes I have to be like, just trust me that by doing the scene, the memorization itself becomes easier.
Yeah. It's in your body memory. I mean, it is awkward at first. Like that's fine. I mean, we can just say it's weird. You're standing up. You have to set up your Zoom camera in a way such that like your body can be kind of seen. So it's not just like you're accidentally just your waist or something when you stand up. And it feels vulnerable because we always want to have the script kind of in our vision, in our periphery. But it's necessary. And when I would be on my feet, I would be so much more likely to remember what I was doing. And it didn't mess with the blocking because I didn't know the blocking yet. It didn't mess with it at all because I could see that being a concern for people. But it wound up just getting it into my muscle memory so that when I did put it on its feet with the blocking, it was so much easier.
Okay, so you're saying that even when rehearsals started and you started getting the real blocking, doing this physical work in the beginning didn't interfere with that.
Right. And that's partly because we always made sure that when I was talking to a different character, I was not just like looking into the Zoom camera at you, but I had a very clear target. I had two different teddy bears that I made the different characters I was talking to. So that made it a lot easier for me, just knowing this is not just memorizing, but this is an actual conversation I'm having. And it was kind of like, you know, physically getting into Judy. Like, how would Judy be standing at this moment? Like, what kind of quick motions? Because she was so fast. She was on Ritalin like all the time, so she was so fast because of that too. So it was very useful, even though I much prefer sitting on my recliner just in general in life. If you're gonna stand up for something, it should be for memorizing lines.
I do remember the teddy bears, and I loved that. It was, again, it seems silly, but there's something about physically interacting with whoever it is you're talking about or talking to. So, like we said in the play, there's two other main characters, Mickey, who's your fiance, and then Anthony, who's the pianist. And for these big scenes where there's the three of you talking, a lot of times it's difficult if you're just trying to think of the scenes and you're transitioning to talking to Anthony to talking to Mickey. It's like difficult to remember what line is which and oh, what's the next thing. But once you actually got up and you were doing it and you're interacting with your teddy bears, it just like became super clear because it's like, oh, with Mickey you can hug him and kiss him and stuff, and then with Anthony you're just like joking around and stuff like that. I just saw immediately that it became super clear in that way when you can just interact.
Yeah, I have a microphone stand, and I even used the microphone stand for the scenes which were like the concert scenes because I knew there would be a microphone there. And so it doesn't have to be a microphone stand. It could be, like your grandmother's cane. It doesn't really matter what it is. The point is that you want to have something physically there with you, and you're just inching your way into the physicality of the role while the lines are seeping into your, memory.
And again, it's not about getting locked into a particular blocking or a particular physicality just yet. Like we didn't do that. We knew very much that like that was going to come later, and to have that flexibility kind of built into the process. But it was at least getting the ball rolling in exploring the physicality and having that help with the memorization, make it much clearer. And then also, yeah, like we mentioned, Judy is like a very physical person in this play. So like you're doing all kinds of things where like you were like rolling on the floor, you're pretending you're a dog, you're almost throwing up in one of the scenes, actually doing that, or like you get down on your knees or at some point or whatever. Like it's stated very clearly in the stage directions, but it seemed like doing that just made the scene make more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way I could have just sat down in the Zoom box and memorized it. It is, any part, even if it's not as massive a part as Judy Garland in this, any part is going to have some kind of physicality that an actor is going to bring to it intentionally. And you provided a space for me to kind of learn my own choices. But I needed to. Like there's no way of embodying the physicality and separating that process from memorizing lines, in my opinion, especially after working with you. I mean, I've tried it. It's probably possible. You can white knuckle it. I mean, we've all probably read a script and gone over it so many times that we memorized it, but it's like so much harder to do it that way. And it does not serve the actor.
And in my opinion, in my experience, it can sometimes be counterproductive to do it that way, where, okay, you memorized it kind of disconnected and kind of in your seat. But then when you're like, okay, now it's time to incorporate the physicality, it's time to incorporate the microphone and stuff. And then that stuff just throws you.
Yeah.
Like, and then you're like starting from square one again. And that is just like super frustrating for people. So the next stage in the process was so you were practicing on your own every day. You were kind of doing like one session a day, and you were kind of doing this process of what I call active recall, which is where you're working with the formatted the version of the script that I gave you that is like more conducive to memorizing. You are reading it over, but then you're starting to test yourself on it so that you're actually trying to pull the lines from your memory and then checking the script to see what the right version is and correcting yourself. It seemed like you were getting to about like 80 to 90% memorized doing it that way, where you had kind of one session per day. And then when we were meeting, we were mainly focusing on getting things word for word. So we were kind of doing that process of refinement and word for word accuracy. Is that what you remember?
I think
Yeah.
in an ideal world, I would have done 2 sessions a day with myself. I just, like so many other people, like I have jobs and I was already putting a significant amount of time into prioritizing this in my life that sometimes doing 2 sessions with myself wasn't possible. But yeah, I think I got to, like you said, about 80 to 90%. And it was important for me to really lock in the specific phrasing. I wound up having help from my wife. I have done this without help from another person, and I now have also done it with help from her. She would read the other parts as well, just in the active recall for me. I've also done it by recording myself, the other roles, things like that. I do find it's easier when you have the privilege of having someone in your house who will work on it with you. It can be really useful, but it's not always possible and it is doable, even if you don't have another person on the other side of it. But our sessions, that was the anchor for me. So everything else was sort of supporting the anchor, which was like our work together. That was what I was always working toward my next session with Joyce. Like, okay, I asked you for very specific goals until we met next, which, as you said, it eventually became twice a week. I knew that's what I have to get to. So rather than thinking I have to learn this whole script, I would just think I have to get the second half of this scene by Thursday. And so that would become my focus. So even just having those micro deadlines was really helpful to me.
Yeah, so our coaching sessions, like I said, it was mostly focusing on that refinement and word for word precision, which is probably the hardest part of memorization for actors is like getting everything word for word. And how I think about word for word memorization is if you think about it, word for word memorization is fine grained, detailed memorization. And because of that, you need tools that are also fine grained and detailed. You kind of have to be looking at things in a closer way or a more microscopic way. It's sort of getting to the meat of things sometimes, I feel, where some people might view it as, oh, it's tedious to try to memorize word for word. But I find if you're doing it in a way that is like fulfilling with the creativity and it's connected to the performance, you're finding like gold nuggets through looking at these little moments. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a huge pet peeve for me as an actor. It really bugs me when I'm working with someone who has the gist of what they're saying. The playwright has a job to write the play and the actors have a job to say those words. I'm also a writer and you don't just randomly choose when you're going to use that term of endearment versus that term of endearment. And with your techniques, and maybe you could give a couple specific examples, but like with your techniques, you would attach a meaning to why you were using that particular word then. And that would also help me in the not only with the memorizing when I was on my feet feet learning the blocking, but also just the objective of the character and why she's saying that particular turn of phrase. The most annoying thing about this play is that so many things get said over and over with slightly differently. That was a huge hurdle for me. And that's another reason why this was so important, to be very clear and specific about why.
Yeah, and in this particular play, I felt like the playwright did a good job in especially how he wrote Judy, because Judy was such a specific, iconic person, and she had a very, very specific way in how she lived, how she expressed herself, how she came alive, and that comes through in how she talks too.
Yes.
We talked about that early on, where the way she actually talks is like an extension of her like musicality and her musical life and her musical training. So there's a musical, rhythmic way, a vaudevillian way in the
Yes.
way she talks and jokes and how witty and sharp she is. I really encouraged like early on like that was all a gift with the memorization, right? Like really noticing how exactly is she saying this? What's that rhythm there? And feeling that rhythm internally, physically was going to help get the lines down too.
You're absolutely right. You also helped me with sometimes using my hand gestures at a particular moment in time would help me to learn that line. And I remember this also from when we worked on Body Awareness, which was another play I was in last year. And, there was this moment where I was referring to something or other, and like you and I always did that with my hand. It's not like that stayed when I was on stage. It just was a step in the process. So there is an element of choreography, I think, in terms of, as you say, the cadence and the musicality. And you're right. Judy also had, as my director would say, there was the performative Judy and like the real Judy. So, when at the very beginning of the play, when she goes into the hotel room and she's looking at it and saying it's so small, which is funny because it's palatial, she's kind of being real. Like that's just Judy. And then when her pianist surprises her and comes in, there's like a little bit of putting it on. And when you're putting it on, you kind of are doing this. And like there's also, of course, the cigarette, and the cigarette helps. So there is a way to attach those kind of physical choices with the memorization in a way that serves the actor as well as the memorizing.
Yeah, because it's like the words, like you said about the writers, when they're really good, they're choosing specific words. And words have an energy to them depending on the word itself, but then also who you're talking to and what you're trying to do. And yeah, exactly. Like the circumstances of are you performing versus are you the real Judy? So we can go into like some of the specific things that we did for the word for word memorization. So, like you mentioned, there were a lot of scenes where she would say the same thing. It was like repetitive, where, for example, there's a scene where is an intermission and like you don't want to go back to
Yeah,
perform. And
right.
she's saying multiple versions of like, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Like, don't
Yeah,
make me go.
exactly. Yeah, going back.
And trying to figure out how to distinguish them. Yeah, there's like another example where I think this is a little later in the play where you're trying to get Anthony to go back to the performance. So like at first he didn't want to go to the performance, but now you did want to go back and you're trying to get the pianist Anthony to come back. And so you say like versions like I wrote it down. It's like you gotta, who else is gonna play? Now you got to get out there and start playing and
Right.
you come and play for me. So it's like different versions again of come and play. I need you to play the piano. Yeah. So what we did with those was we were often trying to figure out like what is the story arc? Like how are these moments different from each other? Because The thing is, you're saying something similar, but no moment is ever exactly the same. There's always a progression or something different about the next moment versus the previous moment. And to draw like an arc or a storyline or a through line between those things, we knew how it progressed one moment to the next, I think seemed to help there.
Yeah. Like, for example, speaking somewhat in generalities, but with those three examples, the first one could be kind of like feeling it out playfully. Like, this wasn't exactly the line, but like, you're going to play for me, right? And then the second one is a little bit more like childish and demanding, but play for me. And then the third one is a desperate plea. And so you and I would track those three reasons why the scene would project that way, proceed that way. I might need help with just speaking sometime, Joyce, if you could work that into your coaching. The perimenopause special, please. Thanks.
No, me too.
Okay. But it helped me to memorize it, but it helped me also when I was in the scene to know where I was in the scene. So if like at any given moment the director was, can we just start from like the middle of the scene? It would be really hard for most of the people I was working with to know where we were going from, but I had a leg up because I already knew why I was going to say it that particular way.
Yeah, that was amazing. Another thing that we did, distinguishing again similar words. This is difficult at times where it's like she puts things like, "Oh honey, oh darling, Jesus, oh God," and it's like
A
how
lot
do
of
I
that.
remember those things and the difference between them? And it's again about being super specific. It's like, why would she say honey versus darling? Is
Yeah.
there a connotation to honey that is different from darling?
So in that instance, honey would be a little bit more like, Judy the performer, or like kind of it's probably how she would talk to a little fan who would come like, oh honey. But darling is more like a term of endearment for someone she's very intimate with. It might be flirtier, things like that. But it was, and I don't mean to jump ahead. We're probably going to get to this, but it would also be really useful if I visualized the person I was talking to, completely full of honey at that moment. Like that was just another tool that you would add in if I couldn't get it down. Darling happens to be the name of my optometrist, Dr. Darling. And so, which that's actually new. But next time I memorize something, I'll probably think of her and like talking to my optometrist while she's wearing like 18 pairs of glasses or something. It's something about your work that has really resonated with me when I can't get it in for whatever reason, because I don't know the reason for this. You do, I'm sure. But sometimes your brain is just like, nope. Like like a groove happens in your brain. You're doing all the work, all of the things right, and your brain, it's nope. And it's very frustrating to be in that place. So that's when you would throw something else at me, like a ridiculous image like that. But speaking just directly about the words, if you do have multiple words that are similar to each other, if you think about why the playwright wants you to use that particular word there, it's kind of fun. It's like gamifying the script. Like you're figuring out a mystery, and it's one of the most exciting parts about acting, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk a bit about what you mentioned, those kind of image-based mnemonic techniques, because those are fun. So what these are is it's using the power of imagery, which we know from these techniques and from studies and things that for some reason imagery is very, very powerful and very memorable to the human brain. And so there's a set of techniques out there where it's like turning whatever it is you're trying to remember into an image that is often like exaggerated, silly, like completely out of the ordinary, shocking or funny or something. And so, yeah, like you said, I like using these sometimes where it just kind of gets it's a thing that can kind of get you out of everyday life and
Yeah.
just make whatever it is you're trying to remember pop out. So we did like funny things like that, like you mentioned, like, yeah, getting covered in honey, or I think we had, and we used ones that were like you said, kind of more personal to you. Like
Yeah.
you were actually really great at coming up with some of those where there was a line that Judy had. She says, so the cue was you've got 3 minutes, and her line is, no, no, I'm finished for tonight. And you thought of your Finnish boss
Yeah.
who's like 3 hours ahead of you.
So three
So,
minutes finished. So yeah, three and finished. That's really funny.
and like another one was the line was, I can't do any more tonight. I'm shaking. Look at me. And your wife is named Moore.
Yeah.
So we were thinking of Moore standing
Yeah.
outside under the night sky, and she's like shaking.
And she
But
did it. She's so silly that like I told her about that and she did it. She's like, all right, come on. And we went outside and she shook outside in the night. So like whenever we get to that part, I would think about it. And yeah, there were so many other things like that too. And that helped me, like the way my brain works, just a super, super visual person. That was just another tool of yours that I found amazing.
yeah, yeah, those are fun. So I thought we would maybe talk about more specifically, there was this one scene in the play that was like the trickiest scene that you had to do.
Ever
It
in my life.
it was quite something because there's confusion that is built into the scene
Yeah.
itself because Judy is confused. So it's a scene where she's performing in one of her performances, and she's trying to sing Blue Skies, but her pianist is trying to play Dancing in the Dark. And then they get like mixed up with
Hmm.
the two songs in the scene. She's also getting tangled up in her microphone lead. And
Hmm.
so she's like referencing like, oh my God, I'm getting tangled up in this lead like several times throughout the scene. And then
Said differently, just slightly.
right, exactly. Like we said before, is like four different versions of I'm getting tangled in this lead. And then you had like the musical cues of like you're singing and then you're talking and then you're singing. And it was just like a big
Yeah.
mess. Like,
While also being, she's drunk off her butt in that scene, but as you know, in order to play drunk, you kind of have to like not really be you have to act normal. Like someone who's playing drunk isn't going to do it well. Like you kind of have to do your best to show that you're drunk without acting drunk. So there were so many elements here and the you were so helpful because we kind of separated all of those elements that you just mentioned, like the story of the microphone lead from the beginning to the end, like why we're starting with it just a little bit twisted around my leg, so it's lighter and funnier at that point. She thinks it's annoying, but it's also kind of cute. And then as she gets drunker and as the scene progresses, it's more annoying to her and it's tighter like on her body, and so like we're kind of tracing the microphone story as its own story. It's almost like and I don't read music terribly well, but it's almost like a line in music that's what that's playing while your other hand is playing this. So we also did that with the songs and why she was singing that particular song at that moment. It was a very hard scene to accomplish. And we didn't perform in front of an audience until opening night. And I was shocked when the audience found it absolutely hilarious because I had been in my head so much with it that I was like, I have no idea if this is going to work. And just because of all of the work we did to make that confusion for Judy intentional for Jasmin, made it something that was ultimately one of the biggest hits of the whole play.
yeah, so part of it was I think our work together on that scene, it helped to make it more clear for you and to memorize those lines and to get the scene just kind of smooth it out for you so you could actually rehearse it and do it. But at the same time, we always knew, I kept saying that this is going to come together once you get the blocking because I
Hmm.
knew like the technical elements are so here and there that once you actually got those technical elements in place where you are getting the music cues, you are getting the specific blocking from your director, that all of that would come together and it would gel at that point. We just kind of needed to help it along first, but I knew it was going to get there
Yeah.
in rehearsal. And would you say that that's what happened?
It did, for sure. It did. And we talked about, like, you helped me figure out why she stopped singing at a particular time. And sometimes she stops singing because the music stops, but a lot of times she stops singing and the music's continuing. And she then starts saying things like, this goddamn lead, it was hard for me to know why I was stopping at a particular moment. So we would be able to put that together. There was also a fair amount of like walking up stage to talk to the piano player and then coming back downstage and talking to the audience. So, kind of figuring out the her impetus for doing it that way it was really useful. It did help it land for sure.
So then the next stage of the process was really about retention because we were meeting once, twice a week, and we were really trying to get through as much of the play as possible so that you were at least familiar with it as much as you could be
Mhm.
before rehearsals started. That was the goal that we had in mind. That was kind of our North Star. So at first you were doing one session where you were practicing by yourself a day, but then you started doing two sessions so that you were making sure that, okay, you were spending one session learning new material and then using the other session to
Yes.
revisit that material. And that's really going into the process that I talk about a lot, which is space repetition, because through refreshing the information that way, you're actually strengthening the memories of that and strengthening retention so that you can hold on to the memorization for longer.
That got better for me the more work we did toward me being more off book. I was able to start to, if I was going to spend an hour total working by myself that day without you, I would start to divide that into like 20 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes in the evening, as opposed to like one sit down of an hour. And you, through your tracker, were able to tell me how often to go back to such and such scene, which was really useful. Like I don't have the tracker open right now, but I think at some point when I was off book for something, I didn't have to go back to it for like many days, which means I could learn more because that's always, I think a lot of actors, including myself, have a tendency to want to start at the beginning every single time. It's just, I mean, if you have a role this big, it's not possible. You're never going to learn it because you're always going to be stuck on scene one or scene two. So you sort of have to trust the process and trust the fact that like it is in your brain. You did memorize it and it will come back once you start to go back to that scene.
That was something that we talked about and knew. I tried to encourage, like, this doesn't have to be perfect yet. I know you are going to get there eventually. But the thing that we were prioritizing was like, we need to get through as much of this play as possible. So you're at least at the level of familiarity for
Right.
all of it. But then that perfecting, that word for word memorization, that totally off book was going to come through the repetition and it would get you there by the time you need it. And I think we did reach that goal where you were basically off book when you started rehearsals. Is that
Yeah.
right?
That pissed off my co-actors so much. They were like, "Are you serious?" And, actually I do want to say that one of the frustrating things about doing this work is that you want everyone to do it and they're not, like the other actors would have benefited a lot from doing it this way. And of course, I can't make everyone do everything the way I want them to, though I keep trying to anyway. It's not working. Because it was a huge benefit to me to come to rehearsals being super duper familiar with it. Like I know I did a good job in this role and it was because I had the time to focus on it. And the reason I had the time to focus on it was because I was able to get off book before we started rehearsals. And that's, thanks to everything we've been talking about today. I highly recommend it.
That was awesome. So the performance itself was amazing. You did an amazing job.
Thank
Like,
you.
it went off really great, and you got amazing reviews also. I'd love to hear more about what was it like. You kind of mentioned how it was in rehearsals, but then also in the performance. How did this kind of help set you up for success?
Honestly, yeah, the best thing, and everyone listening to this is going to know what I mean, but like the best thing is when it's no longer even in your head, the memorization, when you're embodying it and the lines are just in you and the scene is almost just happening. And that was the place I got to. And yet, when you're working with actors who are struggling with their lines, being really on top of your own, it can help them because you can kind of put things back on track if they go awry. So that is the cross to bear when you're good at memorizing. But it was a real gift to get to the place where I was able to really know what I was doing.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I think I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much again, Jasmine, for doing this and this conversation. And congratulations again on this role of a lifetime.
Thank you. I'm so passionate about all of this. I was so happy when you asked me to have this conversation with you because I really strongly think everyone can benefit from working with you on these techniques. I also got really fascinated by memorizing. I don't know if I told you, but I recently read Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. Joshua Foer, that's Jonathan Safran Foer's brother. And I think it's really cool memorizing, having the opportunity to work on our craft in this way adds another element to the love of theater and of acting. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That book is great. And that was an eye-opening book, like just showing how expansive the memory can be. So amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. And I will sign off here.